Shalom and welcome to Biblical Faith with Sam Peake. We invite you to join us as Sam brings a study in the Torah from the Jewish sages. And now our speaker, Sam Peake.
Shalom Aleichem, peace upon you. Are you ready to study a little bit? I hope so, because we have to hop right on it. Let's walk to the board for just a minute, and we have to have some things we need to talk about. In the last program, our subject, by the way, is Aleph to Tav, the Hebrew alphabet, okay? The Aleph Tav. In Hebrew, we would write this, an Aleph is like this, and a Tav is like this, okay? Now, this word, by the way, et, this makes a word in Hebrew, et. We find it all through the Tanakh, everywhere, all kinds of places. In the last program, we ended by talking about what Rabbi Dov Ber, he was the Maggid of Metzrik, what he said in a book called Or Torah, the Light of the Torah. Let me read it again to you very quickly. He says, it is known in Kabbalistic literature. Now, before we go any further, let's talk for just 1 second. Let's talk for 1 second about what we are talking about when we say Kabbalah. Kabbalah, if you'll remember, a long time ago, we went back to look at a very basic Jewish idea concerning how to interpret the scriptures. And there are 4 levels of interpretation. Pshat, the simple, remez, the hint, drosh, the search, and sod, the secret level. That which is esoteric, if you will, that which is hidden in a sense. And this is the basis of what we think of in Judaism as Kabbalah. Now there are kinds of Kabbalah. There is practical Kabbalah. This is Kabbalah that is taught by some rabbis concerning how to change things in the universe, and it involves around what we are talking about here. But that's not what I'm going to be teaching you. We want to look at Kabbalah just as in the sense of a level of interpretation. Now, I know some people are going to tell you, come and say, oh, don't get involved in any shape, form, or fashion with anything Kabbalistic, because it's of the occult and all of those things. That's actually not really true. It is the sod level. The sod level of interpretation is completely and totally focused not on the physical world. It is focused on the spiritual world. Its outlook is heavenly, not earthly. Everything about it is focused on the heavens and God and the world in the heavens and angels and all of these things, and very much on the creation of the universe. The New Testament, by the way, I know most of you are Christians, the New Testament is full of Kabbalah. Believe me, we can point it out time and time again, and actually we are going to point out a few places because I want to try to help your understanding of something. But so don't run from cursory studies. We're not going so deep of Kabbalah, okay? And I'm not trying to turn all of you into Kabbalists, and I'm not telling you to go and study the Kabbalah, and I'm not telling you any of those things. But you need to know that when we are studying the letters that God created first in order to form words, in order to speak the universe into existence, in order to put His thought. He had to have a vocabulary of thought into words, and that would literally create the universe. He had to create a medium for this. And the medium that He created is the Hebrew alphabet. Okay? So let's read for just a moment. This is from Rabbi Dov Ber. It is known in Kabbalistic literature that the letters of the Aleph Beit were created first of all. Thereafter, after that, by use of the letters, the Holy One, blessed is He, created all the worlds. This is the hidden meaning. This is the Kabbalistic meaning. This is the sod meaning of the very first phrase in the Bible. In the beginning, God created et hashamayim ve'et haaretz. Okay? Breshit bara Elohim. In the beginning, created God et hashamayim. Aleph Tav. This little thing here. And I didn't write it so good, so I'm going to do it again. This little word. Now, in modern Hebrew today, and in biblical Hebrew also, this word here, et, Aleph, the first letter of the Hebrew alphabet, Tav, the last letter of the Hebrew alphabet, it usually points to something that's going to be in the passage. For instance, if we use what's called the definite article, if we use the, or if it's a proper name. But oftentimes we'll find this and we find it this way really in the first verse. And when it's marked with this vowel sign here, that it doesn't really have that purpose. It's standing alone, standing by itself. So what Rabbi Dov Ber is saying, it says, in the beginning, God created, and the very first thing is et, Aleph Tav. Now, we know that so we're going to have to speak in New Testament terms here. I don't always like to do that, but we will for right now. Let's go to a place in the New Testament. Already we know that in the book of Revelation, I'm sure we know that Yeshua refers to himself as the Alpha and Omega. If we put this back into Hebrew, it's simply put, it's I am the Aleph Tav, okay? What does that mean? Is he making a reference that he is the first created thing? Well, let's go to another place. Colossians chapter 2. And in Colossians, in the New Testament book of Colossians, in chapter 2, and in verse 15, it's speaking about Yeshua. I have a Hebrew translation here. It's very interesting. It says, "V'hutzelem Elohim asher panav lo yera'u," which means he is the image of the God who cannot be seen. God cannot be seen. Oh, but we have examples of people who saw God. No, they saw a revelation of him. That's what the point is. And this, by the way, fits perfectly with Jewish thought, fits perfectly with the oral Torah. The God who cannot be seen can be seen only when he reveals himself through a physical medium in the physical universe. That's what it's saying. So really, what this Rabbi Paul, Rabbi Shaul is saying in the book of Colossians in the New Testament, he is saying that Yeshua is the image of the God who cannot be seen. He is the revelation of the God who cannot be seen. Then he says something that's absolutely amazing. Now, most translations will say the firstborn of every creature. Some of them will put it really even better correctly. It will say in Hebrew, uvekor, the firstborn, kol nivra, of all the creation. Now, look, I'm sorry, I am a Jew, and don't really and truly don't expect me I don't come to this program with a sword to try to disprove what Christians talk about as the Trinity, or to try to prove it, or any way. But it does bother me as a Jew from time to time to hear Christians speak to me like there are at least a couple of different gods, and depending on the Christian, depending on who's talking to me, maybe there's three, maybe there's two. But in Judaism, there can only be one. And I can't imagine that these Jews in the New Testament are trying to tell you that there's more than one God. This is not really what Paul has said here so far. He is saying that Yeshua is somehow the image of the invisible God, the God that cannot be seen, the Father in heaven, who no one has seen at any time. Somehow, he is the revelation of him. Then he says, the firstborn of all creation. Well, now, if we put two and two together, the firstborn of all creation, that means that he is created. If he is the first created thing, and in Kabbalah we know that the first created thing is the Aleph Bet, the alphabet, with which the Word of God is formed. Is this not what another big Kabbalistic Jew in the New Testament in John chapter 1 and verse 1 is saying? In the beginning is the Word. And what is this Word? This Word is a revelation of the one God. Now, let's go on in the book of Colossians, because it's going to give us even more. It's going to say, he's the firstborn of all creation. Then it's going to say, for by him were all things created. By the way, we can come and we have to ask the question, these 10 utterances that God spoke, What did God, with which He creates actually the physical universe? That's what we have recorded. But what is it that God originally spoke that created the spiritual universe before the physical is created, and all of that? And the idea is that He spoke the text of the Torah. Well, the Torah, the text of the Torah, is also the Word of God, made by these letters, made by these 22 letters. And what I like to do here in this passage in Colossians sometimes is to just substitute the word Torah for Him. Because what the New Testament, I believe with all my heart, I believe the New Testament is trying to teach you is this is His real identity. He is a revelation of God. He is the Aleph Beit. He is the Aleph Tav. He is the alphabet. He is the Word of God. He is the Torah. That's what I think they're trying to say. So if we put that there in verse 16, it would say, "For by the Torah were all things created, that are in heaven and that are in the earth, visible and invisible, whether they are thrones or dominions or principalities or powers, all things were created by Him, by the Torah, and for Him, for the Torah. And He is before all things." Well, of course He's before all things. Because the Torah, the Aleph Beit, the alphabet, is before all things because it's the first thing that's created. And by Him, by the Torah, all things consist. Now that's very interesting because that is exactly what we're going to learn in the oral Torah about the Aleph Beit, about the 22 letters of the Hebrew alphabet, all of those things. Okay, so I wanted to go ahead and punch that in there. Mainly because I think it will help you as a Christian to establish that what we are trying to study here and what we are trying to get across to you is going to be very important for your understanding of the New Testament. Now see, if I didn't have this understanding that the first thing, according to the oral Torah, that is created is the Aleph Beit, the Hebrew alphabet, in order for God to speak His Word, to speak the Torah, to create the universe. If I didn't have that in mind, I could come to what Paul is saying in Colossians and not understand it at all. Maybe. Okay, let's go on. We're continuing. We're still getting stuff from Rabbi Nosson Sherman, and we're going to very much get a lot of stuff from Rabbi Michael Monk in just a little bit. Let me go on with Rabbi Nosson Sherman, what he is talking about here. He says the 22 sacred letters, and there are 22 of them. Let's walk back. We are going to eventually write all of them and study them individually, study them one by one. But there are 22 holy letters. Sacred letters. And we can see that they are holy, especially if they're the first things that are created. And then we also have what are called 5 Sophit letters. Sophit means they come at the end of a word and they take a different form, but they're really just 22 letters. He says the 22 sacred letters are profound, primal, spiritual forces. They are, in effect, the raw material of creation. When God combined them into words, phrases, and commands, they brought about creation, translating His will into reality, as it were. He says there is a divine science in the Hebrew alphabet. Now, Sefer Yetzirah, which means literally the book of creation, it is a book that the rabbis ascribed that its author is Avraham. It is a Kabbalistic work. I'm not urging you to go and buy a copy. You probably couldn't find it anyway, but even if you did, I'm not urging you to do that. And I'm not urging y'all to get into all of this to the extent that you might lose your way. Don't do that. Let's just visit together. Let me plow in it for a while and give to you some good things. Okay? Anyway, in the Sefer Yetzirah, there's a divine science in the Hebrew alphabet. This book describes how the sacred letters were used as the agency or the agent of creation. The letters can be ordered in countless combinations by changing their order within words and interchanging letters in line with rules of various Kabbalistic letter systems. Each rearrangement of the same letters results in a new blend, and this is important, of the cosmic spiritual forces represented by the letters. Now, this is what we want to talk about today. that in these letters, if these letters are, number one, remember they are a revelation of God. They reveal Him to us, just as His creation does, as the creation itself does. But within them, if God is using the letters and He puts Himself into the letters, and they are revealing Him to us, and they are the agent through whom He creates the universe, then there is spiritual force and power in the letters and in the combinations of the letters. Okay? Let's go on. Each rearrangement of the same letters results in a new blend of the cosmic spiritual forces that are represented by the letters. And he says an analogy can be found in physical science as we have today. One combination of hydrogen and oxygen produces water, H2O, right? But another produces hydrogen peroxide. And he says, and so it is with all the elements in the infinite number of the possible combinations that can take place. God's utterance, Rabbi Sherman says, that created heaven also created everything associated with it. The sages and the literature of the Kabbalah teach that there are 7 heavens, by the way, representing distinct spiritual levels. Each one of those heavens has its function, and has its own beings, by the way, that enable it to perform its mission. And what is the mission? The mission of the entire universe, make sure we understand this, is to do the will of God, as found in the Torah, to do the will of God. In each of those ways, he says, in ways unknown to us, is a product of the combinations of spiritual forces that are represented by the letters in their various arrangements. Do you see what he's saying? What he's trying to say is, of these words, by the way, these particular words that God said, Yehi Rakia betok hamayim, veyehi mavdil bein mayim lamayim. In Genesis chapter 1 and verse 6, let there be a firmament in the midst of the waters and let it separate between water and water. Let me go over that again. I want to make sure you get it. I want to make sure I get it. He says each of those levels of the heavens is in ways unknown to us. In other words, we don't know how. But each of those layers of the heavens is a product of the combinations of spiritual forces represented by the letters in their various arrangements of these words in Hebrew. Yehi Rakia. Okay? Let there be a firmament. Betok hamayim, in the midst of the waters. Vayehi mavdil, and let it separate. Bein mayim, between water. Lamayim, to water. Between water and water. Okay? In other words, what the Kabbalistic idea is, that the actual placing together of these particular letters in Hebrew, just them placing them together and being spoken by God, and it came to be. Now, if they had been different letters, something else would have come to be. If God had spoken them with a different vowel, something else would have come to be. That's the idea. Let's go on. That explains to us, by the way, Rabbi Nosson Sherman says, he says, this explains why man's first exercise and mastery and demonstration of greatness. Now, I've always wondered this before I got into these kind of studies. I've always wondered, why does God come to Adam, the first man, Adam? Didn't God know the names of the animals? Why does he come to Adam, and say, and tell me the names of all the animals? What is going on? Hasn't God already decided the names of the animals? Let's read what Rabbi Sherman says here. Man's first exercise of mastery and demonstration of greatness came when God asked him to give names to all the creatures of the new universe. God brought the birds and the animals to Adam. And he says in Hebrew, Lirot ma yikra lo, to see what he would call each one of them. The language is like Adam is being tested. Like this is a test. It's not a participation deal in the sense of Adam gets to decide what we are going to call the names of all the animals and what we'll call them for all eternity. No, it's to see what he would call, to see if he had the knowledge to know what the animals were called, as if Adam were being tested. And it said, and whatever man called each living creature, that remained its name. As if there is something that Rabbi Sherman says eternally significant in the combination of consonants and vowels that are assigned to this creature or to that creature. Now he goes on, he says, in modern times, especially when names are manipulated and invented with the primary purpose of sounding catchy or sounding distinctive or conveying certain desired impressions, Adam's feat of giving names hardly seems worthy of inclusion among the acts of creation. But once we have achieved an understanding, just a basic understanding, of the spiritual content of the Hebrew letters, Adam's task now takes on major dimensions. Let me just read verbatim from Rabbi Sherman. He's so good on this. He says, the man whom God created in our image, in our likeness, Genesis 1:26, whom the angels took to be a divine being. They thought God had created God in a sense. This is from the Midrashim. And they wished to praise Adam with the heavenly praise, Kadosh, 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 holy, holy, holy. Who was so great that he spanned all of creation from one end to the other. Now, see, some people will read this, and this is in the Talmud, that talks about Adam being a giant, that his stature was from one end of creation to the other, like Adam was physically a giant. We have to understand, look, anytime you're dealing with the oral Torah, and I give you this just as a hint, and you run into something that may to you sound outlandish, like that Adam's feet were on the earth but his head was in the heavens. In other words, that he's literally, a few thousand feet tall. Don't always take everything literally. Many times it's spoken allegorically. It's going to depend what level of interpretation in Judaism, from the simple to the secret, that the Talmud or the oral Torah is employing, and what point they're trying to get across. I get so many letters and really complaints from so many people who get into the oral Torah and find what to them are very outlandish things, and so they call me to complain about it, or write me a hot letter to complain, as if I had control over what a rabbi put into the oral Torah, 2,000 years ago or longer. The secret is to learn the levels of interpretation in Judaism, and to learn what exactly the rabbis are trying to get across to us, and on what level of understanding they are trying to get across to us. This one here is a good example of that. Adam, who was so great that he spanned all of creation from one end of the earth to the other, or that his feet were on the earth and his head was in the seventh heaven. What that is telling us is not that Adam was literally 5,000-10,000 feet tall, however, whatever idea we might have. That's not telling us that he was literally physically a giant. It's telling us that his intellect and what God poured into his head and what God literally created him with here and in his spirit went from one end of creation to the other, from the end of the physical creation to the end of the spiritual creation in heaven. Now that's something. This man, this Adam, was truly being asked by God to demonstrate a spiritual insight, Rabbi Sherman says, that was beyond our imagination. When Adam said, now I know we don't have hardly any time left, but let's walk to the board and do a couple of things and then we'll start here. When Adam said that an eagle should be called a shore in Hebrew. No, excuse me, that's not correct at all. Actually, this is a bull. A bull is a shore in Hebrew, and in Hebrew we write it like so. Okay? When he said this, and that an eagle should be called, Nesher. When he said these things, he was saying that the spiritual forces expressed by those letters in this formula, by this particular unique arrangement of letters and vowels, that those things were translated by God into nerve, into sinew, into skin, into size, into shape, into strength, and into ability. That we see when a sturdy bull, he says, pulls a plow, or a soaring eagle excites our imagination. When the verse tells us that whatever name Adam conferred, that remained its name, we're being told what the Baal Shem Tov, you remember him from the last lesson, taught with regard to the eternity of the heavens. The spiritual forces that Adam identified in the form of a name remain active for all time. Do you see what really is going on here? It is a test of Adam to see if how Adam is going to use this knowledge, this word that God has poured into him, this word that God created him with. How is he going to use? Does he really know it? And is he able to combine the letters? Is he able to put them together? The spiritual forces that Adam identified in the form of a name remain active for all time. The same spiritual forces that God translated into a shore, into a bull at the dawn of creation, remain the essence of a shore, of a bull for all time. This idea certainly will blow evolutionary ideas out of the water, where we have one species changing into another. It doesn't happen, by the way. And that's really and truly impossible. I mean, not only that, but there's absolutely no evidence for that at all. So this idea is correct. It remains a shore. It remains a bull. It remains a nesher. It remains an eagle for all time. And what makes it that? Those particular letters put that particular way, translated by God, into the physical thing. We have more to do. Shalom uvracha, peace and a blessing.
Thank you for joining us in our study. If you enjoyed this study and are interested in learning more from the Torah and the sages of Israel, then check us out on the internet at www.bfm101.com, or you may contact us toll-free at 1-800-639-0169. Our mailing address is Biblical Faith, P.O. Box 2, Abilene, Texas 79604. Until next time, we wish you shalom uvracha, peace and a blessing.